And hello and welcome to another episode of the Double A Team live stream. I am your host, Stephen Nagishi, and back for another episode. And tonight I'm very, very pleased to welcome, I should say, a one of Ken's colleague from Awful Announcing. It is Mr. Ben Axelrod. Ben, Happy New Year to you, and thanks for joining us tonight on short notice.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
All righty, Ben. Well, why don't you introduce yourself and how you got your start in the sports media / journalism, and how you ended up at Awful Announcing.
Yeah, so I've been working kind of in the sports media space now for, what year is it? 2024, close to 12 years now, which is kind of crazy to say. Grew up in Columbus, Ohio, right outside Columbus, Ohio. Went to Ohio State. Knew I wanted to do something in sports and something in sports media, and wasn't really sure what exactly that was. I wound up interning at a radio station down in Columbus, 97.1 The Fan. Fell in love with it. Wound up working at the student paper, The Lantern, covering Ohio State basketball and football. Wound up making a bunch of connections on the beat and got a job working at the Rivals affiliate right after college. From there, kind of bounced around the Ohio State beat, just, kind of moving up the ladder. Worked at Scout, worked at Bleacher Report, worked at the short-lived Land of 10. It was a Cox Media Group vertical that lasted about 3 years. I wasn't even there for a year. I don't think I was there for like 6 months. Got hired at a TV station up in Cleveland, WKYC, the NBC affiliate in Cleveland. Covered the Cavs, the Browns, the Indians / Guardians. Kind of dipped my toes in doing more than just sports and doing some news features as well. And then let's see, what month is this? This is January. So about 4 or 5 months ago, wound up linking up with Ben Koo, the owner of Awful Announcing. We've known each other from Ohio State circles and, Twitter friends and whatnot. And wound up finding a position for me at Awful Announcing. So I've been covering sports media as my main beat since September. Absolutely love it. I mean, this is far and away my favorite job that I've had. Just love the daily grind and kind of unique nature of sports media. And so that's what I'm doing now.
Cool. I used to live outside of Columbus myself. I lived there for 2 separate occasions, and I lived in Dublin.
That's where I'm from.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I grew up in Dublin, went to Dublin Jerome High School. My family still lives there.
Nice. That's a nice area. I lived there, and I've listened to 97.1 The Fan. That's a flagship station of the Ohio State University. And what show did you kind of begin? You kind of started your career there at that station.
So at that time, this was like 2009. It was Common Man and Torg, and they had
yes.
They had the noon slot. And I think midway through when I was interning there, they wound up shifting to afternoon drive. But that was kind of, I listened to that show a lot when I was in college, and that's kind of what inspired me to email the radio station and see if I could intern there. So that's kind of what got the ball rolling for me.
Interesting. For those of you who are not familiar, the Common Man is not a real name. That is the man that goes by Mike Ricordardi. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. That's the name of the one of the hosts. Currently, he and T-Bone, Jonathan Smith, Common Man and T-Bone, 3 to 6. Locally on 97.1 The Fan, and they have a very good following, strong presence in that market. As somebody who have lived in that market and listened to them rant all the time on my way home, certainly made my commute a lot easier. By the way, I want to make one thing clear. I'm dealing with a cold, so I apologize. So I'm going to mute myself quite often. So I wanted to make myself clear before I embarrass myself further. But Ken, go ahead if you have any questions for Ben.
Yeah, Ben. Both of us are Cleveland Browns fans. Not from Ohio, but have lost many a body part and to the Browns and everything. But you're from Ohio. You know the area well, and Cleveland and Ohio State two of the most rabid sport fan bases that you'll find. What is it like being a fan of both, and what is it like just hearing sports media from over there? I've done my share of listening to Cleveland sports radio. I can't do it anymore because it just gets so tiring. You do it. You're in the area, so you hear it. It's like listening where I am in Boston sports radio and listening to Belichick bloviators over the last 20 years. It just gets sickening. But what is it like being in the belly of the beast and listening to basically both fan bases when they go off on things?
Yeah, I mean they're two very different fan bases just because of the experiences. I mean, Ohio State, anything less than a national title is a failure, and they're coming off an 11-2 season, and it's considered a massive failure. Meanwhile, with the Browns, they went 11-6 and got blown out in the first round of the playoffs. And a lot of fans are taking it as a moral victory. So, and obviously there's a lot of overlap because there's a lot of Ohio State fans who are Browns fans, but just two very different fan bases in terms of the way they view things and their expectations. And yeah, I mean, Cleveland Browns fans are like no other. I mean, it really is a unique fan base. And, the last few years, I haven't been able to enjoy it as much because I've been covering the games for WKYC. But this year, I mean, I was off the beat. My wife and I have season tickets. So we were at a handful of games and I mean, it's appointment viewing up here, but it was, one thing I'll tell you is Saturday morning before the game. I mean, you could just feel this buzz, not only in the city, but in the suburbs. I mean, all around town, just all the businesses, doing special things for the Browns, everybody out in their brown and orange, sports radio playing 24/7. There was a station here, 850 ESPN Cleveland, did a 24-hour broadcast where they had one of their shows go from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. leading up to the game. So, I mean, it's just a different beast here. But yeah, two very unique fan bases with a lot of overlap between them.
Mm-hmm. And you're Ohio State fan. You've been ranting quite a bit during the Cotton Bowl, which I was listening on my way back from ESPN Radio, and I got to tell you, it had to be very, very difficult for you to watch the offense sputter and just really struggle, and then eventually get manhandled by an upstart Missouri team. And, certainly Ryan Day has to be on the hot seat. He managed to survive this year. And certainly this offseason, they have been really, really getting a lot of players back, thankfully, rather than leaving for the NFL or transfer. What do you make of the current situation with the Ohio State and the and its future? Now, I'm sure next year in 2024, Ryan Day has to win or else situation.
Yeah, I'm probably about as big of a Ryan Day skeptic as you're going to find. I just think that the track record's not there. You can't really point to anything that he's done at Ohio State or prior to Ohio State that's matches, I think, Ohio State standards. Obviously, he has an incredible overall record, but to me, that points more to the state of the Big Ten and the state of college football and the program that he inherited from Urban Meyer. And I thought this past year, even though they were undefeated going into that Michigan game, and had they beaten Michigan, would have been the one seed probably heading into the college football playoff. I just don't think, everything that transpired from the Michigan game on lived up to Ohio State standards. Now, having said all of that, if you were going to make a list of changes you wanted to see in the program outside of firing Ryan Day, like Ohio State has hit almost all of them this offseason. They're active in the transfer portal. They had a great recruiting class. They're being active in terms of their coaching staff and making some significant changes. It looks like they're going to bring in a real offensive coordinator to kind of readjust and modernize this offense. So, from that standpoint, I'm happy that they're being proactive and not resting on having an 11-1 regular season record and then losing a bowl game where some of the starters sat out. Now, on the flip side of that, I agree. I mean, 2024 is now or never for Ryan Day. You have a new president at Ohio State. You have a new athletic director at Ohio State who's going to be aggressive. And I think that this is it. I think especially if you lose to Michigan again for a fourth straight year, which would be the first time since the 1990s that's happened. I mean, I think you've really got to take a hard look at the program, look at the landscape, and take a look at what other coaches are out there, because right now Michigan has established itself as the premier program in the Big Ten. And that is not the standard that Ohio State's been accustomed to under Jim Tressel and under Urban Meyer.
Absolutely. I mean, you go into a situation where Ohio State's had all the success, as you mentioned, under Urban. He was basically Michigan was 0 for career again, 0 for Urban against him, and now you have a situation where Ryan Day's the exact opposite, basically 0 for 3. That doesn't fly very well in Columbus.
No, not at all. And that's, I mean, really it started with Jim Tressel. I think Jim Tressel was 10-1 against Michigan. And look, I grew up outside of Columbus in the 1990s. So the idea of any coach being 10-1 or 7-0 like Urban Meyer was against Michigan is kind of mind blowing. But to have it reversed now just so harshly the other way, where Ohio State's 0-3 in the last 3 against Michigan. Michigan just won a national title for the first time since 1997, in part because Ohio State let them close that gap. This is really, this is go time for Ohio State. This is time where it's time to see what the program's made of and ultimately what Ryan Day's made of.
Our special guest tonight is Ben Axelrod from Awful Announcing, and we'll get to more questions about Ben's writing careers in a little bit. But gentlemen, let's look back at the NFL wildcard weekend. Saturday, unfortunately, the Browns, both Ben and Ken, both post-mortem getting beat by the Houston Texans, which I'm sure that was not something you guys have had in your bingo card. But I want your honest opinion about, how the Browns played this year, about the playoff loss and the inevitable, down year next season, possibly. Ben, I know you touched it on your Twitter handle today. So let's start with you. What was your thoughts on overall the Browns season and how it ended last Saturday?
Yeah, it was interesting because heading into the season, me and every Browns fan I know said this all comes down to Deshaun Watson, that this season is going to go as Deshaun Watson goes. And ultimately, that's not what happened. I mean, Deshaun was very up and down. He played really poorly at the start of the season. He started to come on midway through the season, and then ultimately, suffered an injury back in October in which he was lost for the rest of the season. And then Joe Flacco comes in and goes on one of the more improbable runs in recent NFL memory. And so really, I think what you saw there, and, you factor in Nick Chubb being lost, in the first quarter of the second game, and just all the injuries they battled throughout the season. I think what you saw was this team really has an infrastructure in place outside of the quarterback and outside of Nick Chubb, where, they don't necessarily need Deshaun Watson to be Houston Texans Deshaun Watson. What they really need is kind of a Jimmy Garoppolo type, going back to the success that he had with the San Francisco 49ers. And so, obviously the way the playoff game, went was disappointing, and a little bit like Ohio State, it's almost better that it went that way, because I do think it's going to cause them to take a hard look at some of their shortcomings. But really, I think as a whole, I think you feel good about the infrastructure. You feel great about Kevin Stefanski. You feel great about Andrew Berry, the general manager. Now it's just a matter of heading into 2024. What are you getting in Deshaun Watson coming back from a really serious shoulder injury? And if he's not the Deshaun Watson of old, what's the backup plan? Because I think this is a team that really can't afford to not have an insurance policy just because of the state of this roster. I mean, this is a roster that's ready to compete right now. We saw that this year, and now it's just about how do they take the next step from just being happy to make the playoffs to being a team that can really threaten, Kansas City and Buffalo and Baltimore.
Ken, as a longtime Browns fans, Joe Flacco came in and really rescued the team, but now it's Deshaun Watson who has to really, really step up and justify the picks and the contract that he got from the Browns. What do you want to see the Browns do this offseason? And are you still confident in Stefanski as the play caller or as a head coach moving forward?
Well, I would have to say this season exceeded my expectations. I wasn't expecting much from this season at all. I mean, I did have hope, especially, but when Chubb went down, my confidence went right in the toilet, just like every Cleveland Browns fan. And then when you have 4 different quarterbacks come in, you're usually in a state where you're in a losing record. But instead, Joe Flacco did a tremendous job, and several games above 300 yards passing. You don't see that with someone coming off a couch like that unless it's Joe Flacco. So I have to say, as Ben said, there is infrastructure in place there. There is stuff that gives me confidence for the season coming up. But again, we have to see what Deshaun Watson can do in the upcoming season. He hasn't been the Deshaun Watson of Houston, but then again, I don't think we expected that at all. We just expected him to be at least somewhere halfway there. And we didn't get that this season at all. But again, I'm just hoping that, we'll see some good things coming in. The draft, of course, they had no pick in the first round last season. We'll see what they can do this season to improve. And then I'm just hoping that, at least there is some optimism coming into this season, unlike what we had for coming into last season as well.
Mm-hmm. So the other Saturday game, that got a lot of controversy and a lot of people got up in arms is the Chiefs-Dolphins game, on Peacock. And certainly the awful announcing covered a lot of it in regards to Mike Tirico touting the most streamed event ever with $23 million viewers. But I'm sure a lot of people canceled the Peacock subscription today. But one thing I've wrote and that I've kind of gotten a lot of attention is that they will eventually make us all subscribe and watch Super Bowl. And so, guys, you guys work for Awful Announcing, obviously cover a lot of things, sports media. Ben, let's start with you. Is this something that it's going to eventually happen, or is this something that can be prevented in the future?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't slowing down, and really this is not unique to the NFL. I think for whatever reason, having a playoff game, behind a streaming paywall, that kind of seemed to be an inflection point for a lot of people. But I mean, if you're an English Premier League soccer fan, if you're a WWE fan, if you're a UFC fan, I mean, you're used to having to stream. I mean, those are major components of those rights packages for those products. And we're only going to see that moving forward for WWE. Their rights deal for Monday Night Raw is up at in October of this year. And Amazon Prime is being considered, one of the main candidates for the rights package. And so you've had Thursday Night Football now on Amazon Prime for the past 2 years. And I think maybe because a lot of people already had Amazon Prime through their or Prime Video through their Amazon Prime packages, maybe that wasn't as big of a deal as getting Peacock, which isn't as popular as Prime Video or Netflix. But this is where it's all heading. I think next year we're going to see more than one game behind a streaming paywall. And to your point, I mean, I think eventually, it would not shock me at all if within the next 10 to 15 years, if not sooner, we see the Super Bowl on streaming. So it's going to be interesting because I think that this is the way a lot of the rights packages are heading. And, it's interesting because you kind of have to take them at their word, what these numbers are. And obviously publicly traded companies have to be truthful about that. But all indications are that this was a massive success for Peacock. And if that's the case, there's no reason to think this is going to slow down.
Ken, your thoughts on the streaming? Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. I agree with that. The 23 million was a little bit of a shocker to me, but then again, I just love the way that people said that they weren't going to watch or they were going to boycott, but then it still turned out to be the most streamed product in history of in United States history. So I wanted to say, you did this, people, you did this, America, and it's going to continue. But yeah, I agree with Ben. With Amazon coming into NASCAR, with them likely getting a package of NBA regular season games and likely a package of playoff games as well to help offset anything that Warner Brothers Discovery and Disney decide not to spend on the NBA. Leagues are looking at Amazon and Apple to be the savior to help offset any of the spending cost that the regular media companies will do. So I don't see this going. The genie is is out of the bottle already. You can't cap it back, and I do foresee perhaps not only Peacock keeping its streaming game next season, but also Amazon getting in, because I think they want to see Al Michaels call another playoff game, and they thought that NBC did him dirty, and we can talk about that later. But definitely, I see both Amazon and Peacock having NFL wildcard games next season, and we will likely see more going forward.
Yeah, the streaming aside, the sports in this country, there's always been pay-per-view, of course. The wrestling, MMA, mostly boxing. So it was limited to martial arts type of deal. But, like you said, the Pandora's box has been opened, and now the owners and the networks will probably find the ways to, milk a few more dollars out of the consumer's pocket, like they've been doing, with Netflix, Hulu, and other streaming services. So it's probably going to become more and more difficult for a lot of Americans to watch games on regular channels. Let me ask you guys a question. Would you pay individual games like for the Browns game, like, for example, $6.99, let's just say, all games from start to finish? And would you pay like say $6.99 per game for your favorite team, and you only get to watch obviously your Browns? In my case, the Chicago Bears. I think that might be the direction we're heading in. Their individual games also being charged on a flat fee or something like that. Would you do that, or would you be like, I'm not going to go that far? Ken?
Well, as a Browns fan living in Rhode Island, I got this NFL Sunday ticket package specifically so I could watch the Browns. But I get every other game as well. But we were waiting here at Awful Announcing for Google to announce a team strictly only package, and I think that's coming. I think the NFL, they're going to work that out so fans of their individual team can just buy a package of their team to watch, and that's what I want to see. I've been waiting for that. I had NFL Sunday ticket with DirecTV. They never did it. Although they said they were hinting at it at one point and never got to do it. So I think that is definitely coming. If that happens, I would definitely buy that, because I want to see my Browns every week. I don't want to have to buy the whole thing with a $300 package for a season, or maybe even more. As long as I can get that in Red Zone and Scott Hansen, I'd be happy with that. But yeah, I would definitely like to see that. The NBA kind of teased it with some single game packages that they could buy. They never really went forward with it on NBA League Pass. They kind of did it on an experimentation basis, but I can definitely see maybe down the road that something like that happens, especially with NFL Sunday ticket, because that's part of the innovation that Google's been promising with the package, and I think that's going to be coming down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a lot of ways we're kind of already there. I mean, I think you look at some of the streaming packages that the Bally's regional services offer. I mean, those are essentially pay-per-view packages that come out to like $120 a year for getting MLB and NBA games. So I do think one thing that got kind of lost in all the talk about the Peacock game is that they did, the NFL is very strict about making sure that the games are aired locally over broadcast. Even here in Cleveland, if the Browns are on Monday Night Football, which is on ESPN, they have a setup where it's going to air on either the NBC affiliate or the ABC affiliate. They want it so that people in the market can get the game, with just an antenna. So I think it'll be interesting to see if that ever changes, because I think that would really have a dramatic effect on the consumer. But to Ken's point, I mean, there are NFL fans outside the market all over the country for different teams. And so we've been there. I mean, even when I lived in Columbus, if I wanted to guarantee that I could watch every Browns game, I had to get Sunday Ticket, because inevitably there would be some sort of conflict between the Browns and the Bengals, where CBS would be airing the Bengals in Columbus, and I'd either have to buy Sunday Ticket or go to a bar that had Sunday Ticket. So I think in a lot of ways we're already there.
Yeah, I think the regional sports network also dying had to be a big story of last year, and you see a lot of regional networks as well as the teams, franchises seems to be taking more responsibilities of streaming or providing a broadcasting packages directly to the consumers. So what are your thoughts entering this year 2024? What kind of trends, what kind of things are you interested in following from a sports media perspective? Ben, let's start with you. What are you curious, and what do you if you have any predictions, feel free to spit it out there.
Do we want to talk about Pat McAfee now, or you guys want to wait for later?
Yes. I'll play the clip of his MLK speech a little bit later. But what are your thoughts on the state of the sports media and where it's heading?
So I think, as far as the rights packages and what you were talking about, I think one thing that really stood out is, so again, I live here in Cleveland, and Cleveland was one of the two markets. I can't remember the other one. It was either Arizona or Minneapolis, but Bally wasn't making its payments. When Bally's was facing bankruptcy, they weren't making their payments to two teams. One of them was the Guardians, and I forget the other one. But anyways, they were coming up with contingency plans for what happens if they ultimately don't pay up. And ultimately, they made their payments, and everyone was made whole. But the idea was MLB was just going to step in and take the rights. And I thought that was really interesting, because it wasn't, we'll let them resell it to another regional network, or we'll let them sell it off to someone else. It was MLB wants it because MLB wants to distribute it. And I think ultimately that's what you're going to see in the not too distant future. Is we're not going to see MLB and NBA and NHL teams selling their rights. We're going to see the leagues owning the rights and selling those packages and spinning them off. So I think that was really telling. I think that was kind of a glimpse into where all of this is heading. And, to your guys' point about the regional sports networks dying, well, what happens then as far as, local broadcasts? I think that right there is kind of your answer.
What I'm looking forward to is Tom Brady, and see what happens also with Greg Olsen, because living up here in New England, Tom Brady's interviews never amounted to anything. Although from what I hear, and we had an awful announcing today as well, that he has been doing a lot of research, and he talked with the former Patriots backup quarterback, Scott Zolak, who is a screamer on the Patriots radio network. But I don't think Tom is going to be screaming over Kevin Burkhardt on the Fox broadcast. But I'm going to be interested to see how he does. And also it's going to give off what's going to be happening with Greg Olsen. Is he going to be going to the number 2 broadcast team, perhaps with Joe Davis, or is he going to go to another network, because he does have an out with Fox? So, I mean, he and Burkhardt have become a very good team. They're going to do the NFC Championship, and next season is a Super Bowl season for Fox. So, and while we saw Tony Romo do well with CBS at first, and I know, Ben, we've been covering how badly he's doing tonight in Buffalo. The fact is that Tom Brady coming in basically sight unseen. We have to see how he does and how he's going to perform in the biggest game, on broadcast television on Fox coming up next February. So that's one story I'll be watching in the coming year.
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned earlier, Pat McAfee was actually featured on your site about today's MLK Day. I'm going to play a clip right now of what he said earlier, and then we can probably a little bit have a meaningful discussion about what he was trying to say and then what he meant here.
Discussion, obviously, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yeah, okay.
He had a dream. And I think Lank was one of the closest we have had to potentially that dream coming to fruition.
That's right.
So let's realize that as we look around that we're maybe more close than we've ever been. And there's an election about to take place next year where we need to remember that we are more close than we've ever been. And people could potentially try to drive us apart from the outside looking in. Now, as somebody who was canceled by both parties last week, both of them
That's
canceled
right.
me. Thank you.
Two
Political parties canceled me last week. We are still alive. Let's remember, we don't need all the outside noise. All we need is a little bit of love,
Hell yeah.
which is what we have for all other people that have good intentions every single day whenever they wake up, just like us. Now, with that being said, football is awesome.
Oh, yes, it is.
A discussion, obviously, it is Martin.
Okay, so that was quite a statement coming out of him. I'm still trying to wrap my head around and try and figure out what he wanted to say, but it seems as though he's playing victim, also probably criticizing about the woke culture or Lank, which I think for those who are not familiar with, let any naysayers know, which I know naysayers can be termed as the N-word to describe African Americans that he was been accused of. So Ken, let's start with you. What do you make of this rant, and how long of a shelf life do you think Pat McAfee has with ESPN at this rate?
Well, it is Pat McAfee. He's a provocateur. He says things. That's been his MO ever since he started the show. And he has his fan base, which is quite what ESPN is trying to tap into a younger fan base, because they want to get, and also they're trying to show that they're relevant again in this. We've seen the fact that Andrew Marchand of the New York Post has mentioned in last week, and we mentioned it too on the site, that McAfee doesn't finish his contracts, and he's done that, and he has a history with that. Whether he can, I would have to think that Bob Iger, who the CEO of Disney, is watching this very closely. He's watching this, and he knows that, and the fact that McAfee has licensed the show and still has ownership, that's a big thing for him. So I just have to say that I don't think that McAfee is going to finish his contract at Disney, but at the same time, he's still going to give ESPN some benefits there, because he's still going to be on College Game Day, at least for that part. But it's the fact is that to see what we've seen over the last 6 months with him and Aaron Rodgers, and giving Rodgers a platform, and now this. I'm thinking that maybe ESPN and Pat McAfee may part the way somewhere sooner than later. That's what I'm going to say.
Ben, what are your thoughts? Is juice worth the squeeze, as I guess a lot of people would like to say? Do you think there's a bit of a buyer's remorse with on the ESPN side right now?
Yeah, so it's I don't know if there's necessarily buyer's remorse, because I do think in a lot of ways he's doing what he was brought in to do. I think if there's any remorse, though, it's about the power dynamics and the leverage that they've given Pat McAfee. I mean, he has all the power in this relationship, and ESPN and Disney really have promoted him as, one of the new ESPN model is to have these signature stars, whether it's Stephen A. Smith, or Mike Greenberg, or now Pat McAfee. And Pat McAfee is now one of those signature stars for ESPN, except he's not an ESPN employee, or at least not an ESPN employee in the traditional sense. If they want to terminate his contract or fire him for cause or whatever, I mean, it's no skin off his back. He's going to only grow in popularity. He might not have the reach that he has right now with ESPN, but he's going to only add to his credibility as the guy who is too hot for ESPN. I'm sure FanDuel would welcome him back. I'm sure DraftKings would take a swing on him. I'm sure he would go somewhere else and be just fine. So that's the thing, is ESPN just has no leverage. I mean, if this gets to the point where they just decide they want to cut ties, I'm sure Pat McAfee would be more than happy to collect his paycheck and go somewhere else. So, full disclosure too, I am the one at Awful Announcing who found that clip. I was watching First Take. Actually, I was watching the end of First Take, and I was clipping a video of Stephen A. trolling Cowboys fans. And all of a sudden, I heard Pat McAfee doing, his really poor Martin Luther King Jr. impression. And I thought, hey, let me go listen to that again. And I listened to it. And I was like, what the heck is he talking about? Like, what is he saying? And so I've probably watched this clip, close to 50 times by this point. And I think when you break it down, I don't think he had any malice. I think the Martin Luther King Jr. impression was really stupid. I think the length joke was really stupid, but I don't think he was. I think that was just his dumb humor. I don't think he was intending to offend anyone. And I think even the comments about being canceled, I don't know if he was necessarily trying to play victim as he was making those comments in passing, and then the rest of his cast of producers or whatever kind of seized on it, and then it became a thing. But I think his overall message was, love and unity and all that stuff. And that was his way of celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But it was just so clunky, so sloppy, so not put together that it came out in the fashion in which it did. And, when I came up with the clip, I thought, the headline could be any one of three different things. And ultimately it was the canceled part that I think was most relevant as far as the Aaron Rodgers stuff from last week. So look, I don't think that this whole thing, I do think, some of it was really, really dumb. Some of it was ill-advised. I don't think it's necessarily on par with any of the Aaron Rodgers stuff from the last few weeks, but I do think that it's just another straw on the camel's back. And to Ken's point, it's just a matter of time until, there's one too many straws on that back, and they have to make a decision on what they're going to do here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Ben. And an interesting point. You never know how things are going to blow up. That clip has blown up for us on the site as well, and it's amazing how just one little thing, and as you mentioned, you were just doing something else, and all of a sudden you heard that, and you clipped that at the right moment, and on a holiday, it comes out, and especially on MLK Day, which he was trying to. At least I don't think he was trying to mock it. I agree, he wasn't trying to mock it at all. I just think he was just trying to be humorous in a way, and just trying to give a message that just didn't resonate at that point.
Mm-hmm. A couple more segments with our special guest tonight, Ben Axelrod from Awful Announcing, Stephen Negishi, along with Ken Fan on the AA Team live stream Monday night. So let's get back into the playoffs on Sunday. Sunday's game kind of started off with the Dallas getting blown out by the Green Bay Packers. And as a longtime Bears fan, I hate the Packers, and I hate the fact that, we could have knocked them out of the playoffs. And now, they completely decimated the Cowboys from start to finish. And a lot of talks have been, excuse me, what was that, Ken?
Maybe that's a good thing for the Packers that they knocked out the Cowboys.
Right. And we know that the Cowboys is a glamour, glitzy, so-called America's team and everything. But let's talk football. Ben, when you look at the Cowboys and the way they got dismantled, you got to think that, Mike McCarthy's time with the Dallas Cowboys is on a short leash, or is probably close to coming to an end after yesterday's performance.
Yeah, and I think what's most interesting about this offseason is this is like the most attractive coaching cycle I can remember for any team that wants to hire a new head coach. I mean, you have Bill Belichick, you have Mike Vrabel, you have Jim Harbaugh, and those are just the quote unquote proven commodities. Then you talk about the young offensive coordinators like Ben Johnson with the Detroit Lions, Bobby Slowick with the Houston Texans, Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, this is like a whole, like, there are going to be 6 teams here who walk away from this cycle feeling really good about their new head coaches, even more so than usual. So, I mean, if you're on the fence about firing your head coach, like, I don't want to wish upon anybody to lose their job, but like, you kind of got to go for it. I mean, the chance to hire Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick or Jim Harbaugh alone, and especially the Cowboys, a team that's ready to contend, a team that's ready to compete, a team that, despite yesterday's result, is one of the most talented teams in the NFL. I think a lot of people are making the connection with Bill Belichick, but I mean, you look at any of these candidates, and there are just so many attractive coaching candidates in this cycle. Raheem Morris with the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, I think if you're on the fence, you've really got to look hard, because I could see any one of these head coaches who get hired in this cycle winding up being like the star of this coaching cycle. It really is incredible. I can't remember a coaching cycle like this.
Yeah, and you have to mention Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. He's got to get his shot too. I mean, yesterday aside, the Cowboys defense is one of the better defenses in the NFL. So you have to think that he would also get his shot in if a team wants him as well. So yeah, the Cowboys laying an egg in the playoffs is an annual thing, despite the fact that Mike McCarthy has been 12-5 the last 3 seasons. But what's interesting is that it didn't. I'm sure the executive at Fox were started to drink very early during that game. They didn't like what they were seeing in Los Angeles. They were hoping at least to get them into the divisional round and perhaps in the conference championship. But again, not to be. But the fact is, though, that the NFL and the Fox got a $40 million viewership, average viewership for the wild card game on Sunday, has to give them a little bit consolation. But not to have the Cowboys going farther like they did, especially when they laid an egg like that, isn't going to help.
Yeah, as a Bears fan, I'm kind of pissed that they decided to bring back Matt Eberflus for the the continuity of a culture, so to speak. And I'm sure, Ben, you're hoping that Jim Harbaugh finally leaves Michigan for the NFL job. There was reports that he had completed his interview with the Los Angeles Chargers, which is kind of interesting because they still don't have a general manager in place yet. I know it's been a long rumor that wherever Harbaugh ends up, he wants to take control of the roster decisions, something that he never had with San Francisco, which is why he ended up fizzling out with Trent Baalke at San Francisco. So we shall wait and see what happens. And then on the nightcap, Detroit playing their first home game playoffs at home, in 30 years. And I have to say that, it was depressing watching both the Packers and the Lions just take that step notch. And, I lived in Michigan for 6 months when Dan Campbell took over, and people there were just making mocks and fun of Dan Campbell's coach speak and his demeanor and everything. But I kind of think that, Dan Campbell really embraced the city, and the city embraced him back. It's kind of like when Mike Ditka became a head coach of the Chicago Bears back in 1982, so some over 40 years ago, and really embraced the personality of the city and the franchise. Let me ask you, Ben, do you think that this Dan Campbell style coaching has a lasting power, or do you think that at some point it will come crashing down?
I think the most interesting thing about Dan Campbell is, for years now, since analytics have really come to the forefront of football, there's been this tug of war of analytics guys versus football guys. We saw it with the Browns when they did their teardown with Sashi Brown and Hugh Jackson and all that. I mean, they went heavy on analytics, and ultimately, everyone was fired within 2.5 years. Dan Campbell is like the best of both worlds. I mean, he is the football guy. I mean, he could still line up at tight end for the Lions, next week. But also they are a very analytics friendly front office. They make a lot of analytics driven decisions, both, when it comes to roster construction and on game day. They had 2 first-round picks last year, and they got actually absolutely lambasted for taking a running back and taking an off-ball linebacker. And now Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell are 2 of their key contributors during this playoff run. So I just think it's, that's the thing, is he's not this, gruff football guy, I'm going to put my hand in the dirt and we're going to out tough the other team. He is that, but they also are analytically driven. They also make smart decisions. They're also aggressive about how, going for it on 4th down and things of that nature. So, and then just, the way he meshes with Detroit, the way he has totally embodied that fan base in that city. I'm really happy for most of Detroit outside of the ones who are Michigan Wolverine fans.
Ken, your thoughts on the Lions' victory yesterday?
Yeah, it was fun. As someone who's has had no dog in the hunt, it was great to see the Detroit celebrate a win like that. It's a fan base similar to the Browns who have suffered way, way too long. Glad to see them finally get a win like that, and also kind of see what the turnaround after the Dallas-Detroit game from earlier this season, which was so controversial. It was nice to see the Detroit coming out on the winning end on that. So, again, the Detroit fan base, and I know a lot of fans especially on Twitter, and knowing a lot of them have suffered through a lot of through the years, 0-16 seasons, bad draft picks, bad coaching, Matt Patricia. They've gone through it all, and to see that Dan Campbell coming in and just as you mentioned, embracing the city, becoming basically this this blue collar guy, showing his emotions, will kneecap somebody. It's great to see, and it's something that the fan base has embraced, and to see them get a second game next week at home is going to be fun to watch. It's interesting because NBC will have both games that they had last week, and then they'll have this week, and kind of similar to what CBS is going to have. They're going to be in Buffalo's for 2 consecutive weeks in the playoffs too. So it's going to be fun to watch, especially when they for a chance to go to the NFC Championship game.
A couple more minutes with Ben Axelrod from Awful announcing on the Double A Team live stream tonight. Ben, one of the biggest stories this offseason in any sport was the signing of Shohei Ohtani to a massive contract, which really it kind of exposed the current state of sports media. I was kind of pissed about people like Mad Dog Russo referring to his stealth negotiation to the the World War II allies building atomic bomb and stuff like that, which was very insensitive, and yet somehow it didn't really registered a blip on the radar. And then you have John Paul Morosi, who we all know he is a well-respected journalist, having to go on Twitter and then take accountability for the some of the information that he tweeted out about Ohtani's next destination. What do you make of all this? People getting up in arms about the way Ohtani handled the negotiation, and is this something that we might see a little bit more from an American athletes themselves, or this is just basically something that's an outlier, much like his contract?
Yeah, I think it's an outlier just in the sense of the sheer star power that he carries. I don't think there's another, baseball player on the planet who carries the same amount of star power. And so, this was baseball's version of the decision. This is baseball's version of LeBron James. This was, the most highly anticipated free agent that I can really remember in my lifetime, following baseball. And so I think ultimately what you had was, an American media used to following, I can remember LeBron James was a free agent. He went on a big free agency tour, and, there was media camped outside every meeting that he held. And then he announced it on a nationally televised TV special on ESPN. And so obviously that is not how Ohtani was going to handle things. That's not how he handled things. And so what you were left with were baseball reporters, with just this overwhelming thirst for information and knowledge. And ultimately, Ohtani wasn't going to give it to him. So you got kind of the cluster mess that you got. So I do think this is an outlier. I do think, even other players, I don't know if you'll see another star player handle his free agency in quite the same way. And I don't know if, Bryce Harper was a free agent a few years ago. That's probably the closest comparison. And there was nothing like this as far as, how that all went down. So I do think this is an outlier, but yeah, I mean, it was a mess. And ultimately everybody except Ohtani and the Dodgers were kind of left with egg on their face.
Ken, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you and I discussed it, how we thought of it earlier. So I'll just leave it at that. I think, Ben, I agree with you. I'm certainly hoping that the way Ohtani handled his negotiations is not the way that we've seen other free agents handle theirs. So hopefully, like we mentioned, John Paul Morosi won't be looking and trying to follow another plane again anytime soon.
All right, I'm going to end on this note. Ben, once again, thank you very much for your time. And advice to anyone wanting to break into sports media. And I know you took the traditional route of studying journalism at a university, and you've been to multiple outlets, mostly internet, Bleacher Report, and now Awful Announcing. What is your advice on anybody wanting to get into the industry, and how do you deal with the setbacks and also rejections and having to change companies here and there, and what is it that you like about your job, and what is it that you don't like about your job that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think that it's a lot there. I think my best advice is just reps. Like the more you do something, the better you're going to get at it. And you're taking more swings, you're taking more shots, and it's the more you write and the more stories you put out, the better chance there are that somebody's going to notice you, or you're going to make a connection, or you're going to build a following. It's, you need to have stuff written. You need to, be active, and that's easier said than done, because sometimes it requires writing for free, which is not necessarily something I always recommend. And, sometimes that's not something that you can always do. Sometimes your circumstances dictate that you can't write for free and you need to make money. So it's really a tough industry to break into. As far as the setbacks and all of that, I think you just have to be willing to adapt. I think you have to keep up with the trends. I think you have to be, willing to work hard and do all those cliche things, but it's true. There's a reason they're cliches. So as far as what I like about my job, I mean, at this point, everything. I absolutely love my job. I'm at the point now where I don't feel like I'm working for the weekend. I'm actually, like, when I get to the end of the weekend, I'm excited to hop back on and write stories at Awful Announcing on Monday. And then as far as what I don't like about my job, it's, if you work in sports media, like, you're never going to have traditional hours. There's always going to be stuff on the weekends, always going to be stuff at night. But that's what you give up to do what you love and to write about an industry you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Well, follow Ben on Twitter at Ben Axelrod, AXELROD. Ben writes for the Awful Announcing, which Ken is an associate editor of. And Ben, I appreciate your time tonight, and we look forward to having you on again several months down the road, and see if the landscape of sports and sports media has changed. And good luck to you, and I'll continue to follow your work on Awful Announcing. Have a great night, and thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. This was fun.
Thank you very much.